In 1944, 40 minutes past 5 in the morning, roughly 3 miles off the coast of Normandy, a steel ramp comes down, not onto sand, but onto open sea. A ramp coming down is supposed to be the end of a crossing. This one is the start of one. You are sitting in a 32-ton Sherman tank. Above your head is not armor. It is 9 feet of waterproofed canvas, held up by rubber tubes and steel struts. Between the top of it and the water, a few inches. You cannot see France. You can see the inside of a screen and a rectangle of gray sky. In 50 minutes, the ramps of the infantry landing craft drop onto a stretch of coast codenamed Omaha. The plan says these tanks are already there when that happens. On the sand, guns firing, armor waiting in the only minutes that matter. That is the purpose of this machine. One job and a fixed deadline. 29 of them were driven off those ramps into the channel that morning. 2 reached the beach. The other 27 did not. For 80 years, the easy answer has been that the machine was a bad idea. A tank that was never meant to swim and didn't. That is not what happened. Proving it is what the next 15 minutes are for. 2 miles down the same beach, at the same hour, another American tank battalion looked at the same water and reached a different conclusion. And before the sun went down, this same machine would work almost perfectly on a different beach. 5 men, 1 hatch, 3 miles of water. To understand why 29 tanks were driven off a ramp into a sea that could not hold them, you have to go back 4 years to a drawing board in England and a Hungarian engineer handed a question with no sensible answer. Every opposed landing of the war had taught the same lesson, expensively. Infantry stepping onto a defended beach without armor beside them are men in the open against men in concrete. Somebody had to put tanks on the sand in the first minutes, not the 10th, the first. And the only way anyone knew how was to drive a landing craft the size of a barn straight at the shore. Exactly what the German gunners had spent 4 years waiting for. Nicholas Straussler was a Hungarian-born engineer working in Britain, and the brief he was handed reads like a joke. Make a 30-ton steel box swim. He answered, with canvas. They called it Duplex Drive. Around the hull of a Sherman, a collapsible, waterproofed screen rose 9 feet on rubber tubes and steel struts, and 2 propellers turned off the tank's own engine. It floated not because it was light, but because that canvas wall pushed aside more water than the tank weighed. A boat made from a tank and a bedsheet, and it worked. But the canvas was the hull, a screen with 30 tons of armor hanging underneath it, a tear, a strut that folded, 1 wave over the rim. There was no second system, nothing a man could close. There was canvas. So the design carried a condition. It was built for near calm water, guidance commonly cited as waves of roughly 1 foot. Roughly 1 foot. Remember that. The crews trained in sheltered water, off coastlines chosen for being quiet. They practiced getting out of a tank that was going down. The seconds they had. How not to fight the water. Some carried escape apparatus of the Momsen lung type, a rebreather to buy a man his way up through the cold. It was serious training. But every rehearsal assumed a tank sinking on its own. In water, somebody had chosen. Nobody had trained them for what a collapsing canvas screen does to the hatch you are trying to climb out of. None of this was a weapons trial. It was a promise, made to men who would never meet the crews making it. When the ramps drop, the armor is already there. An elegant answer to an impossible question, conditional on one number written into the design: calm water. On the morning of the 6th of June, off Omaha, the sea was running roughly 6 times higher than that. The invasion had already slipped once, from the 5th to the 6th, on the weather. That was not a free choice. Tide and moonlight lined up on very few mornings that month. Wait, and you wait weeks. So the fleet sailed into a sea that had calmed, but not enough. Off Omaha, the waves that morning are commonly sighted at around 6 feet, with wind and chop on top. 6 feet, for a machine whose guidance was written around roughly 1. The sea was not the only thing against them. There was the plan, written weeks earlier by men who had never seen this water, and it was a thing of fixed minutes. Bombardment lifting here, aircraft clear by then, the infantry ramps at 6:30, every service keyed to every other. A plan built that tightly has no setting for wait and see. Roughly 5,000 to 6,000 yards out, around 3 miles, the order is given, and the 741st Tank Battalion launches. Engines running, screens up, a steel ramp coming down onto water that will not hold still. The first tank rolls off, and it floats. For a moment, the impossible idea is working. 32 tons of Sherman, under its own power, swimming toward France. Then the bow swings. A wave comes over the rim of the screen, not through it, over it. Then another. And the canvas that was holding the sea out is now holding the sea in. The engine keeps running. It keeps running for a while. You are in the dark, in a steel box, and the water is at your feet, and then it is higher. 1 hatch, 5 men, and above that hatch, the only reason you are ever floating is folding down over the opening as the tank goes under. Some men got out, many did not. And the channel in June is cold. Cold enough that reaching the surface is not the same as surviving. 27 of 29 were gone, most within minutes of launching. 2 swam the full 3 miles and made the beach. 3 more reached the sand only because a landing craft's ramp jammed and they were put ashore directly, an accident of machinery that saved 3 crews. The men still on the landing craft watched the screens fold, one after another, in the half-light. 27 tanks were on the bottom before the first infantryman set foot on Omaha, and the conclusion writes itself. The machine failed. Except it didn't. 2 miles west, on the same beach, in the same water, at the same hour, sat the 743rd Tank Battalion. Same Shermans, same screens raised, same orders, the same water slapping over the bow in the dark. It did not launch. Consider what that required. The invasion was a timetable 3 services deep, pinned to minutes set weeks in advance. To refuse to launch is to tear a page out of it, alone, on your own authority, minutes from each hour, knowing that if you are wrong, the infantry walk onto that sand with nothing, and it will have been you. Being right is not the hard part. Being the one who decides is. The naval officer commanding that group looked at the sea, judged that nothing would swim in it, and took the landing craft all the way in onto the sand. Those tanks arrived largely intact. Same morning, same water, same machines, same plan, opposite call, opposite outcome. So it was not the canvas. It was not Strausler. 27 crews went to the bottom because of a decision about where to open a ramp. And we know that because a man 2 miles away made the other decision with the same information, and his tanks reached the beach. Then, further west, the second proof. At Utah Beach, DD tanks went into the water that same morning, much closer in, into a sea doing far less. Commonly cited, 28 of 32 reached the shore. They came out of the surf and did the exact job the machine was built for. Guns on the sand, beside the infantry, in the first minutes. The design passed its examination that morning, within sight of the same invasion. None of which makes the officers of the 741st villains. They were handed a plan and a clock, in poor light, with no way to know what that swell would do to a screen until tanks were already in it. A debrief is not a hunt for someone to blame. It is a hunt for the moment it could have gone the other way. This is that moment. Designed for water running roughly a foot, launched into water running roughly 6. 3 miles out instead of a few hundred yards. 2 men made a judgment call within a few miles of each other, and history graded them both inside 20 minutes. But the men who paid for that call were not only the tank crews. Most of those were already gone. The rest of the bill came due 50 minutes later. It is 6:30 in the morning. The ramps of the first wave landing craft come down onto Omaha Beach. These men have been told what is waiting. In the briefings, they were told armor would already be on the beach. Shermans at the waterline, guns firing at the bluffs. Some heard it more than once. It was the part of the plan that made the plan survivable. What is there instead is obstacles in the shallows, half covered by a rising tide. Then open sand, hundreds of yards of it, with nothing a man can get behind. Above it, high ground held by men who have had 4 years to decide exactly where to aim. And no armor. Almost nothing on that beach shooting back. The guns that were supposed to answer those guns were 3 miles out on the bottom of the channel. The first waves at Omaha were pinned in the open for hours, with the tide climbing behind them, largely because the armor sent to meet them had already sunk. A few Shermans do get into it, the 2 that swam the whole way. The 3 put ashore when a ramp jammed. A handful more later, working from the waterline, the only mobile guns on that stretch. A plan written for dozens, carried by a handful. Roughly 156,000 Allied troops came ashore across 5 beaches that day. Omaha was by far the worst of them, with Allied deaths there commonly cited in the low thousands. What saved that beach was not the plan, but what replaced it. Destroyers stood in dangerously close and fired on the bluffs almost over open sights. Men went up the draws in 1s and 2s without orders because the officers who had them were gone, or the orders no longer described anything real. And the crews out in the water. The escape training was real, so was the apparatus. Some got out of those hulls and were pulled from the channel alive. Others got out of the hull and never got out of the water. The training was not useless. It was asked to do more than training can do. By nightfall, the beach belonged to the Allies. Almost none of it had happened the way it was written. And 3 miles out, in the dark, 27 tanks were settling into the floor of the channel, where 80 years later, they still are. The Duplex Drive tank was not abandoned after Omaha. It went on being used through the rest of the campaign in Europe, for river and canal crossings, for short hops across water armor had no other way to cross. And it went on working, because it went on being used the way Straussler built it to be used. Short distances, sheltered water, a few hundred yards, not 3 miles. What changed after the 6th of June was not the tank. It was who got to decide. How far out to launch stopped being a number set weeks in advance by men who could not see the sea, and became the judgment of the man standing in it. That is the lesson of the morning, and it was paid for at retail. The Hungarian engineer's canvas box did exactly what he said it would do. It did it at Utah on the same morning, within sight of the same invasion. It was simply never given the chance off Omaha, and they are still there. In the decades since, divers have located and surveyed DD Shermans on the bottom off Omaha Beach, hulls sitting upright on the sand, the steel frames of the screens still standing around them, more or less where they went down and roughly in the order they went in. There is no monument on that stretch of the channel floor. The tanks are the monument. 5 men in a steel box, under 9 feet of canvas, 3 miles from a beach they never saw, holding a plan that had already stopped being true. The engineering explains what happened to them. It was never the story. They were. 29 went into the water, 2 came out. Everything else that morning followed from that. If you want the rest of the war told this way, one decision followed all the way to what it cost. Subscribe to War Debrief. There is more of it than anyone would like.